Solo mothers and single mothers both totally rock. We can all agree they're both amazing groups of women. As a society, we want to give them a collective hug. They're both doing a great job. But there are some major differences between them. And in this video, I'm going to go through 7 main differences between being a solo mum and a single mum. So the words solo mum and single mum are often used interchangeably. But in this video, when I say solo mum, I'm talking about someone who is a female sole parent. There is no father. They are the only parent to that child. Usually that happens when a woman decides to have a baby by herself, by her choice, using a sperm donor. The other situation where someone might end up as a solo mum is if the father passes away, which is a very tragic situation. A single mum is where a child has 2 parents, but those parents are not in a romantic relationship. In many situations, that mum is doing the vast majority of the child raising, but not always. Sometimes the 2 parents share the child raising equally. Now, I want to be very clear before I get into this video that I do not think it's better to be a single mum or better to be a solo mum. They both have advantages and disadvantages, and both groups of women are absolutely amazing and get my full-hearted support and cheering. So the first and probably most critical main difference between a solo mum and a single mum is that the solo mum is the only guardian of that child. Whereas in the single mum case, the child has 2 guardians. So this means if something happens to the mother and it's a single mother, the child can still be cared for by the father, or the father's still there to arrange someone else to look after that child. That child is not alone in the world. That child is not an orphan because that child has a father. In the case of a solo mum, if she was to die, the child would be an orphan. There is no other parent. And that's something that can weigh very heavily on solo mums. I've been involved in a lot of discussions in Facebook groups and other forums with solo mums who are trying to set up their wills while they're pregnant to make sure there's a backup guardian, a friend or a family member who can take on responsibility for their child's well-being if something happens to them. And this is something that single mothers do not usually have to face because there is a backup parent in the picture in most cases of a single mum. Now, obviously, there's sometimes a case where there's a deadbeat dad. He hasn't been seen for 10 years. He might not even take any responsibility if the child's mother passed away. And that's an extreme situation. There's obviously always exceptions. But in the usual case where there's a single mother, there's usually a father somewhere, maybe heavily involved, maybe a tiny bit involved, but that father is still alive. That father still exists. That child is not going to be an orphan. This issue of being the sole guardian and what if something happens to me, who will look after my child, that has been such a huge issue for me in my journey as a solo mum, and I've discussed that in some personal private videos that I share in my online community. I don't share those personal videos on YouTube, but if you want to hear about my struggle with that and how I have grappled with that, definitely join the My Baby Dream community and watch those videos. So the second main difference between a solo mum and a single mum, as a solo mum, you have the sole 100% full responsibility for your child. As a single mum, you may have the majority of responsibility, but you don't have the 100% full sole responsibility for that child. There is another person who is also responsible for the well-being of that child. Now, in many cases, single mothers have a huge amount of responsibility, sometimes 80 or 90% of the responsibility for the well-being of the child, depending on the custody arrangements. They may have that child 9 days out of 10, or they may have that child 51 weeks of the year, but they don't have the 100% full sole responsibility. There is another person alive who is responsible for that child's well-being. And that is just psychologically, emotionally, logistically, and financially a dramatically different situation when you have a second person who is to some degree responsible for the child compared to a situation where you're a sole parent and you have full 100% sole responsibility for the child. Both situations still require an enormous amount of time and energy and love as a mother. Both of those mothers are absolutely amazing women. But one of them has 100% sole responsibility for the child's well-being. The other one has most of the responsibility for the child's well-being. And I just think it's important to talk about this because sometimes people conflate the 2 situations and neither group is getting the empathy and the understanding that they need. So the third way in which these 2 groups of women are different is that the solo mum is the sole provider. In the case of a single mum, there are 2 providers. So when you are the sole provider for a child, that means you have to provide all the money to pay for that child. You have to, by yourself, earn the money that's going to pay for that child's schooling, that child's housing, that child's food, that child's toys, that child's activities, that child's education. That's 100% on you. You're in the role of the breadwinner, and you're having to very much draw on your masculine energy to go out into the world to generate income to provide for your child. When you're a single mum, you may be one of the two breadwinners, you may not. You may be receiving a huge amount of child support from the child's father, and you may be able to be a stay-at-home mum and not have to work, or you may be 50-50 providing for that child with your ex-husband or your ex-boyfriend or your ex-partner. Or you might be doing 90% of the providing, even 95% of the providing, and that father's just had to be taken to court through a custody battle to get a tiny bit of child support out of him. But you know what? A little bit of child support still takes the edge off. I feel for both of these groups of women. I'm just explaining that in the case of the solo mom, she is the sole provider. It's 100% on her to pay for that child's life. It's one of the reasons why solo mums, who are commonly called single mothers by choice, are such rock stars and have to get really, really organized, usually before they even get pregnant, to get their financial house in order, to get their life in order, to get income coming in, to have sources of passive income, to hustle, to get a second job, to save up, to buy a house, to sell a house, to do whatever they can do to set some money up so they can pay for their fertility journey, so they can pay for their pregnancy, so they can pay for the birth of their child, so they can pay for the looking after of their newborn, so they can pay for the toddler, so they can pay for the child in their life. One of the things that really defines the solo motherhood journey that you have to get your shit together. Whereas when you end up as a single mother, often it's not planned. It's because the relationship broke down unexpectedly or the husband left. But you certainly didn't plan to become a single mother. You planned to have a long-term relationship with that father. So you suddenly find yourself as a single mother, and maybe you're not having to do the 100% providing. Maybe it's only 70%. But because you didn't expect it, you weren't prepared for it, you didn't plan for it, sometimes you can be in a much worse situation financially than someone who's a solo mum who's had their time to prepare for the solo motherhood journey and get their finances in order. So we really need to remember that neither group is better off here, they're just different. So now moving on to the fourth main difference, and that is that the solo mum has sole custody and the single mum usually has shared custody. So the solo mum looks after the child 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They never hand their child off to someone and have a night off or have a weekend off. The single mum has shared custody. So they may have the child 50% of the time, or they may have the child every night, but the father gets the child 1 day a week. Or the single mother might get the child during the weekdays and the father might have the child on the weekend. Or the single mum might have the child most of the year, but the father gets the child for 2 weeks during the Christmas break, or something like that. Every family situation is different. But these two situations are extremely different, and there are positives and negatives of both. So let's take the solo mum. Obviously, the challenges of having sole custody of your child is that you never, ever, ever get a break.
You never, ever, ever get a break.
The only way you can get a break as a solo mum is if you're lucky enough to have parents who are the child's grandparents, or a sibling who's the child's auntie or uncle, or a close friend who you trust, who you can maybe leave your kids with regularly, or maybe you find a babysitter and over time you come to trust them enough to leave your child with them every now and then. But it's hard to have a regular scheduled night off, or a regular scheduled weekend, or a regular scheduled holiday like you would as a single mother. So yes, you're going to get a break when your child's at daycare or your child's at school, but you probably have to work then. But it's extremely hard as a solo mum to get a break in the evenings or the weekends. It's just relentless, and you never ever get a day off. But on the flip side, as the single mum, you're often in a very difficult custody sharing situation where you have to do a handover once or twice a week, where the child has to pack up all their things and their food for the week, and you got to drive them to the drop-off point and then have some sort of interaction with your ex-partner, which may be really, really uncomfortable or really, really argumentative or inflammatory. And then you got to watch your beloved child drive off with this person who you may not have a high opinion of anymore. And then your child's gone for the next 2 days or 3 days or one night or a week, and you're really anxious because you don't know how that person is raising them. You don't know what's happening there. Often there's not very good communication between the two co-parents. And so the mother could be very anxious, not knowing what's happening with their child, not having any control over that. And it can be extremely destabilizing for the child, going back and forth between two different households, two different parents, two different parenting styles, It's just a tangled web to work through and to live with. And it's highly, highly complex and can be highly, highly charged and can be extremely stressful. On the other hand, you have the solo mum who never ever gets a break, but at least they have their child all the time and they don't have to give their child to a situation that they have no control over. And they don't have to miss their child and they don't have to wonder what's happening to their child. So you can see that both of these situations have their pluses and their minuses. Neither is better than the other. They're just different. And in this video, we're just getting really clear on what the differences are. So before we move on to the fifth difference between a solo mum and a single mum, I just want to say that in this video, I'm talking in very general terms about solo mums and single mums. I'm not talking about my personal journey. I do make a lot of videos about my personal journey as a solo mum, but I've chosen to show those videos in a private space because I really want to respect my daughter's privacy and I want to talk in great detail about our lives and what we're going through and what it's like for me as a solo mum. So I've created a private online community called the My Baby Dream Community, where you can go and you can join and you can watch all my private videos and see really what it's like to live the daily life as a single mum by choice, as a solo mum. And the other beautiful thing about that community is that lots of women from around the world are joining it, and they're all women who have taken an unusual path to motherhood or who are currently trying to get pregnant in an unusual way. So some of them are solo mums, some of them are single mums, some of them are older mums, some of them are much younger mums, some of them are using donor sperm, some of them are using donor eggs, some of them are using surrogates. None of them are having a typical motherhood journey, and they've all joined the community so they can watch my videos, but also so they can share their own stories with each other and ask questions and make friends and just get a lot of support for their motherhood journeys. So I highly encourage you to go and check out the community right here, and I would love to hang out with you there. It's a really, really beautiful, loving, welcoming space. Okay, so difference number 5 between a solo mum and a single mum is that the solo mum is the sole decision maker, whereas a single mum is a joint decision maker. So there's pluses and minuses to both situations. When you're a solo mum, you are making all the decisions about your child. You're deciding which doctor you're going to use during your pregnancy, and where you're going to give birth, where your baby's going to sleep when it's a newborn, when you're going to start solids. You're deciding whether you should use a nanny or whether you should send your child to childcare, which daycare center to use, which kind of bike your child should have, which school should your child go to, which camps should your child go to, how much money should you put in their savings account. You are making every single decision by yourself. The single mother, depending on the custody arrangement with the father, is either making most of the decisions by herself, but then having to run some of them past the father, or the two parents have some sort of harmonious co-parenting relationship where they make all the decisions jointly. Or maybe they divide the decisions, so the mother is responsible for some of the decisions and the father is responsible for the rest of the decisions. Or maybe they just have to argue about every single decision until they come to some sort of compromise. But it's a totally different situation when you're a single mother and you have to jointly make decisions, or you're a solo mother and you have to make the decisions by yourself. And there's pluses and minuses of both. Because as a solo mum, you get the freedom that you just make decisions that are right for you and your child. You don't have to run them past anyone else. You don't have to get a second opinion. You don't have to get into any arguments. You can do what you want to do, what's right for your child, according to your opinions and your philosophies and your values. But the downside is that you have the weight of having to make every single decision by yourself, and that can be exhausting and time-consuming and stressful, never getting to be able to bounce any decisions off someone else and get their input. Of course, you can have friends and family that you can ask, but ultimately every decision is yours. There's positives and negatives to that. As a single mother, you have, in some cases, the advantage there's a second brain you can bounce everything off. If you get along well with the father still, you can get input into your child's well-being and make decisions together, which can be very comforting. That the other person agrees with you, that can really make you feel good about the decision. But in situations where there's conflict or the two people don't get along, that decision-making process can be very fraught, very stressful, and very exhausting, because every single decision about the child involves negotiations and compromise and arguments, and sometimes mediation, and sometimes courts are involved. So it can be incredibly stressful. Both of these situations have their pluses and their minuses. So let's talk about difference number 6 between being a solo mum and a single mum. And that is, as a solo mum, you are the sole carer. In the case of a single mum, you are not the sole carer. So what do I mean by the sole carer is, as a solo mum, you are the only person caring for that child. So basically, what I'm talking about is at 3 a.m, when that child needs their nappy changed, when you're a solo mum, you are the only person doing it. You are the only person caring for that child in the home. As a single mum, you are probably mostly doing the caring for that child. But there's going to be days of the week where that child is not with you and your ex-partner is caring for that child. Your ex-partner is feeding your child, your ex-partner is changing the child's nappy or helping them get dressed or helping them do their homework or whatever it is that they need at that age. So you're not doing all the caring. But obviously, in many, many cases, the single mother is doing most of the caring. They may be doing 13 days out of 14 days every 2 weeks, but they're not doing all of it. Maybe the ex-partner takes the child to their swimming lessons or takes the child to their tennis lessons or takes them out to dinner to a restaurant once every couple of weeks. That's one meal that the single mom didn't have to cook. That's one swimming lesson that the single mom didn't have to take the child to. In the case of the solo mom, it's all on you. All the caring is on you. Now, you can outsource that caring. You can have a nanny, or you can use daycare, or you can ask a family member, you can ask a friend to come and help, but it's still up to you to arrange all of that. And in many, many cases, the solo mom might not have grandparents around or uncles and aunties around, and the solo parent may have to do all the caring. The solo parent may not have the money to pay for a nanny or someone else to come and help with the caring for that child. So in many cases, the solo mom is doing all of the caring. But not in all cases. Sometimes a solo mum can make arrangements to get help with that. And I have many, many friends who are single mums, and there are many times where their child is with their ex-partner for the day or for the weekend or for the week, and they're getting the time off. They're not having to care for their child because somebody else is doing it on a regular basis. And that's the child's second parent. In the case of a solo mum, it's all on you. All the caring is on you. But obviously the positive of that is, just like when I talked about the custody, you're getting to spend so much time with your child because caring is a part of loving. You're helping them get dressed, you're changing their nappy, you're cooking for them, you're giving them that love and that nurturing. It's a beautiful thing. So once again, my mantra in this video is there are pluses and minuses to both situations. Both groups of women are superstars. So now I'm going to talk about the final major difference between a solo mum and a single mum, and that's that the solo mum has the sole bond with the child. The child is only bonded to one person. Whereas in the case of a single mum, the child has a bond with two different parents, with the mother and with the father. Now, the advantages of there only being one bond is that it can be a very simple dynamic. Mother and daughter, or mother and son. It can be a beautiful situation because when there's only one parent, that child or those children are going to have a very strong bond with that parent because that's the only person they have in their life who's there with them 24/7 in the trenches of their life. So the bond is beautiful and powerful and strong between a solo mum and her child or her children. Obviously, the bond between a child and a single mum, it's also very, very strong because they're also spending most of their time usually with the mother, at least 50% of their time with the mother, in many cases 80 or 90% of their time with the mother. So obviously they're going to have a very, very strong bond with that mother. But the child also has a bond with the father. And the advantages of that is that they get to have a lifelong connection with a second human who knows them from birth, who knows everything about them. And that's a beautiful thing for a child to have. But the challenge is that that child has to negotiate and navigate two different bonds with two different adults, and those adults may not get along, they may be in conflict, they may have completely different value systems, completely different parenting styles, and that child has a bond with both, and that child has to somehow figure out how to retain their bond with both parents without pissing the other parent off. So there can be issues around loyalties and one parent turning the child against the other parent and trying to damage their bond and vice versa. And it can just be a very complicated, difficult situation. But as I've said, the advantage is the child gets to have deep bond with two different adults. In the case of the solo mum, that child has not got a second deep bond. They've only got the bond with the mother, which is a sad thing. It is. Everyone would love to have more deep bonds in their life. But the solo mum can make sure there are other people in that child's life, like grandparents, uncles, aunties, friends, community members, so that child can build other bonds with other adults. But obviously, it's not the same as a bond with the father. But that's one of the major differences between a solo mum and a single mum, that the solo mum has the sole bond with that child. Whereas in the case of a single mom, there's another person who has a primary bond with that child. So now that we all understand the 7 main differences between a solo mum and a single mum, in my next video, I'm going to talk about the main things that these two groups of women have in common. The 4 things that single mums and solo mums have in common. You can watch that video right here.